afternoon, everyone. My name is Frank Costanzo. I'm your host today. I am Vice President of Sales and Business Development with Springer Publishing. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Our webinar today has two parts. So number one, we're going to share some information about an exciting new DNP program from the University of Tampa. And part number two, we'll hear from Carl Buck, the author of his newly published book titled Pay for Your Graduate Nursing Degree Without Going Broke. The sponsor of our webinar today is the University of Tampa and their Department of Nursing, and we're absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to present this webinar with them today regarding not only the book, Carl Buck's Pay for Your Graduate Nursing Education Without Going Broke, but also the University of Tampa's new DNP program. Each participant in our webinar will receive a copy of the book, Pay for Your Graduate Nursing Degree Without Going Broke, free of charge, compliments of the University of Tampa. We expect our webinar to last about 40 minutes, and feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. And our team of representatives from the University of Tampa will be kicking off the webinar today, and they'll also be available for questions at the end of the webinar. As I mentioned, today I'm joined by Mr. Carl Buck, one of the authors of the book, Pay for Your Graduate Nursing Degree Without Going Broke. Carl's book just published last month, and it includes the most critical information and tips that you must know to reduce the cost of your nursing degree. Good afternoon, Carl.
Good afternoon to all. Good afternoon, Frank.
I'm also joined by two individuals from the University of Tampa, Dr. Cindy Parsons, the DNP Program Director. Dr. Parsons is a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner and educator and University of Tampa's current director of the Postmaster's DNP program. She's worked in a variety of clinical practices and has maintained a part-time private practice for the last 20 years, as well as presented as a speaker at numerous state and national conferences. In 2009, she was inducted as a fellow of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners in recognition for her contributions in education, practice, and policy. In addition, she was the faculty lead on an AANP nurse practitioner resource set on ADHD across the lifespan. She is currently the membership chair for the Florida Nurse Practitioner Network. So welcome, Dr. Parsons.
Thank you.
We also have Mr. Alex Sanguinetti, and Mr. Sanguinetti is the primary admissions counselor for the University of Tampa's graduate level nursing program. And he also serves as a main point of contact for all applicants interested in applying to the University of Tampa's MSN and DNP programs. So at this point, I would like to pass it over to Mr. Sanguinetti to take you through some information about the University of Tampa's Doctor of Nursing program.
Thank you, Frank. Hello, everyone. Again, thank you all for attending. So I'd like to just go over a little bit about the University of Tampa. For those of you that aren't familiar with our institution, we are a medium-sized private university, and we offer more than 200 academic programs. We're located in the beautiful Tampa Bay area. For those of you that are familiar with Tampa Bay and the state of Florida, we're known for our beaches, art and music scene, museums, sports, business committees, and of course, year-round outdoor activities due to the wonderful weather that we have here. Prior to being the University of Tampa, the campus itself was formerly known as the Tampa Bay Hotel Resort. It was founded in 1891 by Henry B. Plant and became the University of Tampa in 1931. We do hold currently full accreditation by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. Our BSN and MSN are also accredited by the Commission on Collegiate Nursing Education. Due to the exemplary nursing programs we already have in place, we're currently pending accreditation for our DNP program, which we won't be able to apply for until we've gone through one full year of it. But like I said, with the success of our BSN and MSN programs, we don't anticipate any issues with accreditation in the future once we're eligible to apply. Jumping right into the presentation itself, some of you may be asking, what is a DNP degree? The DNP is one of two terminal degrees available in the nursing field. One would be the PhD, which is traditionally research focused. It is where most students will create healthcare policies, guidelines, conduct research studies for new knowledge in the healthcare field. And it basically asks the question of, does this work? So any research or studies that are done, it's asking, are they successful? Opposite that, the DNP is much more practice focused. They utilize advanced practice roles in clinical settings, and it addresses a more translational research approach. And instead of asking, does it work, it takes the material that is found and created in a PhD program and asks, does it work here? Does it work in this specific clinical setting or this environment? And if it doesn't, how can that be adjusted? On that note, you may be wondering what UT's DNP is. It is a practice-focused professional doctorate program that focuses on practice rather than policies. Again, sort of opposite of the PhD. It's designed for the working APRN in Florida. It is designed to be online and part-time schedule so that you can continue to work in your clinical setting while earning your doctorate degree. We prepare students for the most advanced level of clinical nursing practice. And we teach you how to design, implement, and evaluate evidence-based disease management care and coordinate acute and chronic illness care for individuals and populations. We're very proud to announce it is our first online program as well as the first doctoral program that UT is creating. We do not use extra clinical rotations here. The DNP project serves as your clinical hours, so you can think of your project as your practicum hours. Each cohort starts in the fall semester, and it is cohort-based, so you do follow a strict schedule of classes each semester. We start our cohort with 25 students maximum. The program itself totals at 30 credit hours and is 6 semesters. Again, it is a part-time setup though, so you have less than 8 credits each semester. You're not going a full-time graduate schedule. There are 3 residencies, so to speak, that will take place on campus that are conducted over a 2-day weekend each fall of the semester. So outside of those, it is an entirely online program. Some of you may also be wondering, what is the purpose of obtaining your DNP? So for our program in particular, graduates of our DNP program are prepared to function as expert clinicians and leaders in the highest level of clinical competency with their areas of specialty. They gain in-depth knowledge into complex healthcare systems, and you will be able to distinguish yourselves from other nurse practitioners that maybe have not acquired their DNP quite yet by your ability to provide direct care, conceptualize new models based in contemporary nursing science, research, and policies. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Parsons, who will be able to speak a bit more about the DNP project itself.
Hi, and welcome everyone. So here at the University of Tampa, the DNP project is the main focus of your doctoral education, and to be successful in it, we designed it so that you actually begin working on your project during the first residency. So you need to apply and come to the program with some concept of an evidence-based practice that you want to look at implementing or clinical guidelines that you want to look at implementing. And in the first DNP 700 course, which it starts in the fall of the first cohort, you'll be working on kind of fleshing out the framework for your project and looking at some key elements so that when you get through to summer of the next year, you'll be able to readily put that together in the DNP capstone course number 1. So to be prepared for your capstone course, it's really, really important to start looking at your clinical practice or looking at clinical practice or health populations in general and identifying, if I had the ability to make X be perfected, or I had the ability to do, say, continuous glucose monitoring in all my patient population that has diabetes, would I have improved outcomes? So we really like that you start thinking about what that clinical problem is and who could you work with. Part of our program is designed so that you partner with a community agency. It can be where you live, or it may not be. I mean, you may make a different choice, or it may be a broader organization, such as a healthcare organization, like a system of care. For instance, Lee Health down in the south of the state works with a lot of DNP students doing their projects there. And they have a very broad network. So it certainly is not that you have to do it within your own organization that you work with. And then once you complete your evidence-based translational research project over the course of 4 semesters, then you're going to disseminate the findings to clinical organizations, and during your last residency, disseminate it and share with future UT DNP students on campus. So let's go to, now we're going to go and look at what the program looks like. So you can see that the fall semester, you're going to have 3 courses for a total of 6 credits. DNP course 700 is that course that you're going to be working on your DNP project. So during the first 2-day residency, a good bit of that work is going to start. Then you have your clinical epidemiology for advanced practice nurses and advanced practice nurse care of at-risk and vulnerable populations. They're really trying to look at improving the health and outcomes of vulnerable populations or populations as a whole. Your second semester, another 6-credit semester, is going to be research translation, which is going to help you to look at developing your literature review, looking at your study design or how you want to implement your project. And then you also have healthcare informatics and information systems for advanced practice nursing clinical practice. So within the framework of that, you can be looking at, oh, can I use my electronic medical record to gather data or look at my at-risk population so that you can come away with some tools that you can use to be more effective. This semester 3 is a summer semester, so that's a shortened semester. And so you're only going to be taking 5 credits, healthcare leadership and management for advanced practice nurses, and then your initial DNP project. Now that's where a lot of the work for bringing together all those pieces that you started on in 700 will come together. Although in 701 or 706, sorry, you'll be working on your IRB proposal as well. Now it won't be completed proposal, but absolutely. And for the first 2 chapters of your project, capstone scholarly project. Then semester 4 is health policy and advocacy for clinical practice, and the implementation of your, or the finalization of your IRB approval and your lit review and all of those elements. And then finally, semester 5, you're going to be implementing your project, and you'll be taking genomics and APN clinical practice along with that. And then we come to semester 6, a 2-credit semester where you're going to do your evaluation and dissemination and come for your final residency, and then talk about graduation and be prepared to be hooded as a doctoral candidate.
Thank you, Dr. Parsons. This is Alec again. Just to go over the program costs, because it is, of course, one of the necessary evils of graduate degrees. A total cost for UT's DNP program is $32,500 for the total tuition cost. In addition to tuition, students are also responsible for covering any associated program costs such as books, lab fees, software, and any other additional program requirements. So the cost can vary per student depending on the books that you'll be using during your program, what semester you're in, and any software that you may need to install for the online format of the program. Criteria for admission. So in order to be to the program, you must be a Florida resident. Our program is currently only open to practicing APRNs in the state of Florida. We also require an MSN degree from an ACEN or CCNE accredited school, and you must have a 3.0 minimum GPA in your previous MSN program. We also require national certification as an advanced practice registered nurse, APRN, and then the 3 Ps, we call them: advanced pathophysiology, advanced pharmacology, and advanced physical assessment in your MSN must be completed with a B or better. As far as the application requirements, we do utilize Nursing CAS for our DNP application. We will require transcripts from all post-secondary institutions of education, as well as documentation or a letter from your previously completed master's program indicating the clinical hours that you completed for a minimum of 500 total hours, at least in your previous MSN. We also require your current professional resume or curriculum vitae. The personal statement is essentially going to be a collection of professional goals and how admission to our DMP program will help you facilitate those goals or complete them. I always recommend for students that may not be familiar with it to use APA format, and it can be anywhere from 500 to 800 words, although if you want to exceed 800, you will certainly not be penalized for that. That's just our minimum recommendation. We do require 3 letters of recommendation or evaluations from academic or professional references, one of which we do require to be from a professor that holds a doctorate degree in your previously completed MSN program. We'll also require a copy of your current licensure as an APRN in the state of Florida, which must remain active throughout the program. We also require your BLS or CPR certification, again, which must remain active, and proof of professional liability insurance, and it also must remain active throughout the duration of the program. At this time, we are also very proud to offer guaranteed admission for UT MSN alumni. So those students that have graduated from our MSN program, we offer guaranteed admission into our DMP. And based on this chart, you can see that some of the requirements are waived for our MSN alumni. For example, we will waive official transcripts, as we can already acquire those through our own systems. We also waive the documentation with the clinical hours attestation on it, because as you graduated from our MSN program, we know the amount of clinical hours that you've completed. On the resume, we also waive the 1 year of APRN experience. So if you graduated very recently and have already sat for your boards and passed those, congratulations. Maybe you don't have APRN experience quite yet. We will go ahead and waive that requirement for our MSN alumni. In regards to the letters of recommendation, we will also waive all 3 if you graduated within the last 5 years of your application. However, if you graduated more than 5 years from applying from our MSN, we will only require 1 letter of recommendation. We also waive the personal statement, as we are already aware of your academic goals because you were previously in our MSN program. I do like to include the financial aid aspect of our program. I know Carl Buck, the author, will go into a bit more detail about this, but in case you were wondering other options for funding it, I do realize it is an investment on the applicant's end, so I always like to reiterate that we do have financial aid available for our graduate students. And then there is a doctorofnursingpractice.org/resources website that offers all the different grants and scholarships available to DMP students that are possibly wondering how they can afford to go back to school. But again, the second part of this presentation, Carl Buck will go over all those different options as well. The next steps of the process would be to make an appointment with an admissions counselor, and my email is available there on the screen for those of you that are looking into it and are very eager to apply. For the nursing CAS application, we're currently accepting applications for our fall 2020 cohort, and we do use rolling admission here, which basically means that once we have all the documents needed for your application, we immediately send it for review to the DMP review committee. And from there, it usually only takes about 3 to 4 weeks for them to reach a decision. So pretty streamlined on our end. We don't like to keep you all waiting, as we know you're very eager to start with us as well. Of course, on Nursing CAS, you will need to submit all the necessary document applications and answer any supplemental questions that are also involved in that application process. In case you wanted to stay connected to the University of Tampa, we have some social media pages available. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. So if you do have some questions, just hold on to those. And then at the end, we'll have a time frame designated to answering any questions that weren't already covered about UT and also about Carl's book as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dr. Parsons and Mr. Sanguinetti. That was a terrific overview of the program. For this part of the presentation, I'll be joined by Mr. Carl Buck. As I mentioned, he's one of the authors of the book, Pay for Your Graduate to Nursing Degree Without Going Broke. And Carl's book was just published last month, and as I mentioned, it includes some of the most critical information and tips that you must know to reduce the cost of your nursing degree. Just a little bit about Carl. Carl is a financial aid expert with more than 30 years experience guiding students, parents, and educators on matters related to how to pay for college. And as the former director of financial aid at leading institutions such as Rice University, Rutgers University, and Director of Financial Aid Counseling at the University of California, Carl brings his insight and unique inside perspective to individuals and families, challenged with keeping up with the cost of paying for either an undergraduate or graduate degree. Carl has appeared on numerous talk shows and has been extensively quoted on college financial aid matters in leading media such as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Kiplinger's, and Bloomberg Radio. And most recently, Carl served as the Vice President at Chase Student Loans and as a Senior Consultant at Discover Student Loans. So Carl, let's start by discussing some of the opportunities associated with reducing the cost of an education. And Carl, just take us through some of the topics that we'll be covering today.
Will do. Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Doctor, and thanks, Alec. I do want to piggyback on something Alex just said, which I thought was very valuable to the attendees today. That has to do with that student loan website he referred to. I actually went to it this morning, and there are over 35 references, 35 websites to turn towards for the Doctor of Nursing practice grants and scholarships. I just want to reaffirm that. I think that can be of great value as the attendees move forward, trying to figure out how to pay for their cost and keep their debt down. So as Frank just referenced, we're going to take a look at what are the critical tips to remember when completing that free application, that enigmatic free application for federal student aid for your graduate nursing degree, understanding your graduate student loan options. And when we do start talking about graduate student loan options, think in terms of it being a fluid exercise, meaning things can change on an annual basis. And understanding the full cost of your nursing degree and how to maximize education tax incentives to obtain stacked scholarships. Now, the reason I bring this up is Rick Darvis, who is the co-author of the book, is a well-known CPA. And as we speak today, he's doing taxes, I can assure you. So regrettably, he wasn't available on this particular day and time. But I will make sure before we close out today to talk about the kind of research he does and his ability to find brand new, innovative ways for Uncle Sam to help pay the educational bills.
So, Carl, I know in your book you start really by talking about the best ways to approach the challenge of paying for a higher education. And you also refer to the financial aid maze. So what are some of the best ways to approach the application process?
Well, great question. I think the interesting part of this presentation is there may be a lot of folks attending and hopefully will matriculate to the University of Tampa's program that haven't filled out an aid application in quite a while. Historically, you would fill out a free application for federal student aid based upon prior year income, but things have changed over the last few years. So when your FAFSA is submitted, you'll be reporting income from 2 prior years. And I suggest as well, if you have kids who are currently in high school or in college, this could be a great refresher for them as well. So we're trying to look at this, at least we did with the book specifically, as a holistic event. But again, it's important to understand what are the financial aid timelines? What are the submission requirements? Trying to understand, as Alec referenced today, the admission timelines. And he said this is basically rolling, which I think is very good. Makes life a little more easy for the student applicant. You have to get your own federal student aid ID. And I know I'm throwing a lot of detail here, and this entire presentation is full of a lot of substantive, but nonetheless detail. So my advice from the financial aid perspective is to take a look at studentaid.gov, studentaid.gov. The reason I bring that up is that particular website put out by the Federal Department of Education has had some major changes recently. It's been upgraded. They're trying to make it far more consumer friendly and to be your advocate. And speaking of advocates, I want to mention this now because we never know where these presentations will go. I think the good news for the University of Tampa is that they've assigned 2 graduate financial aid counselors to work on this program. And I want to applaud them for doing that. because it's all too often in my own experience as a former aid administrator, one size doesn't necessarily fit all when you're trying to take a look at unique needs of applicants. And since this is a brand new program, I suspect there's a lot to learn from all parties concerned. Now again, getting back to understanding these applications, you have to make sure, in my opinion, that you work with the grad counselors at the University of Tampa so that they are, for all intents and purposes, they're your advocate. They are your advocate. They are your gatekeeper, your doorway to move things forward in a positive way and to ensure that as you're filling out a variety of student aid applications, you're doing it in the right way. Now, the last comment I will make about applying for aid is, I think it's important to realize when you're applying for student aid, apply before you're admitted. Get the information rolling, gather the kind of paperwork you need, and get that in the door, and then let the University of Tampa work with you on both the student aid side and the admission side. And where the slide has come up now, it's never too early. I try to really emphasize that regardless of who the attendees may be, from undergrad to grad, etc. I think it's important to get as much information as possible. And a recurring theme we've referenced in the book, and I'll do it in a lot of in-person presentation, is for the applicant, especially on student aid, to take ownership of the process. The reason I bring it up is the institutions take ownership of their process. So in similar fashion, I want the applicant for student aid to take ownership of their application process, to know how it has to work, what are the requirements, and to follow up and follow through. That's really pivotal. Some more ideas as it relates to taking things into consideration on your FAFSA checklist. We just referenced, again, prior year. And as I said before, it's important to work with the graduate office at the University of Tampa. One more time, this is not taking information off the rack. What the university is doing is assigning and aligning their staff to work one-on-one for this brand new innovative program. Moving forward into the ever-changing world of graduate student loan options. And I've got to tell you, it really is, as I said earlier, a very fluid situation. What we know today could change very quickly. I'll give an example. It was announced today that the Federal Reserve Board was reducing some of their interest rates at which various entities will borrow. And in my opinion, not necessarily factually, what will probably happen eventually, I would say on or around July 1st of this year, I think graduate loans, undergrad loans may be reduced. Now, a year ago, they were reduced slightly. So bear in mind that every July 1st, student loans can very well change. It's, in my experience, unique to have federal loan interest rates stay exactly the same from year to year. Highly unlikely. So more detail for you. You can take out, in order to support the cost at the University of Tampa for your grad program and DNP, a graduate unsubsidized loan. Here's more detail. You're probably turning your head, but hang in there with us. You can borrow $20,500 on an annual basis. Now, this is the important part because the devil really is in the detail. The fees for a grad unsub loan today are approximately at 1.5%. The interest rate on a graduate unsubsidized, again now, unsub means not based on financial need. That interest rate currently is a little over 6%. It's at 6.08%. So you have to factor in a fee of 1.5, an interest rate slightly over 6%. So it isn't just that you're taking out a loan. You have to aggregate, if you will, all of the costs that are involved. Now, there's another loan called the Grad Plus, and you can borrow up to the full cost of attendance for that program. But prior to doing this presentation today, I had asked Alec and the good doctor what the costs are for a yearly basis, and they said a little over $18,000, which I think is a heck of a deal, because in our book, we've researched colleges all over the United States, and I can assure you that that figure on an annual basis is extremely cost effective. Now, another possibility of consideration of borrowing is private loans. So factor in grad and sub, fees, interest rates, the Grad Plus, and by the way, I should have mentioned this, by being remiss, that those fees for the Grad Plus are at 4.236%. Figure 4%, interest rate at 7%. Now you see how things are moving forward. And these are loans from the federal government. You move into the private world, and at the University of Tampa's website, you'll see that they actually have the ability to take a look at what they call fast choice, F-A-S-T, fast choice, where you can take a look at approximately 11 lenders that they have listed as preferred lenders. Not that you have to use them, but they're just going with their considerations for you to analyze, and they have the ability to have 5 loans analyzed at the same time. And I would then ask you to work with the university itself to have them walk you through the best way to move forward. Now, the irony is, in the private lender world, today you can have an interest rate lower than a graduate unsubsidized loan. That seems to be unrealistic, but that's our reality today. For example, if you were borrowing from a private lender, and they can be a bank, they can be a different kind of an entity like SoFi, that variable interest rate today would be at 3.75%. Now that's based upon creditworthiness, may require a cosigner. Hard to believe, but a private lender can be less. However, in my own experience, I would work with the federal loans first before moving towards a private lender. Again, I would ask for the advice and counsel of the graduate student aid office at the university. So again, you have to really factor in how are you going to borrow, what's your total debt burden going to be. These are the kinds of things you need to know, and that's when I say take ownership of the process, because you're worth it. Taking a look at postponing education loan repayments, my understanding, and I double-check this as well with the university, is if you're carrying at least 4 credits in the program, you're going to be considered on a part-time basis. And for federal student aid purposes, if you're carrying enough credits to be listed as part-time / half-time, you can have your loan deferred, meaning you don't have to repay at this point in time. I don't know where each of you is on this webinar today. Every one of you is unique. You're like a fingerprint. You have your own situations. Presumably you're all working, but you may be currently paying back a loan. And if you are, think about contacting your lender to see if in fact you can defer payment on the loan to minimize your costs as you're moving forward with your degree. You have to bear in mind that once you defer the loan, the interest continues to accrue because the loan, again, is unsubsidized. That's my presumption. You have to notify your lender or your loan servicer that you're continuing your education and you're at least half-time. You also want to talk with the University of Tampa because you're going to have to complete, if you're going in this direction, an in-school deferment request. So that's why I'm saying the university can be your advocate and really keep you out of harm's way. And there's so many things, regrettably, today that are somewhat mystified in the graduate student loan world about student loan repayments, going to work in underserved areas, income-based repayments. It's all over the map, and this presentation isn't meant to clarify all that, but the assigned counselors at the University of Tampa grad office can certainly guide you in a very professional way. Now, moving forward to what I was referencing earlier about tax capacities and tax-related issues. And again, I'm sorry that Rick Darvas, the co-author, is not here today, but I'm not a CPA, Rick is. And when you get the book, complimentary, as was referenced earlier by Frank, you're going to find at least 4 or 5 chapters focused strictly on paying for college in a tax-efficient manner. We wanted to have a book that would be very innovative and proactive with someone who's working full-time, and I suspect many of the attendees today are working full-time. So the latter part of the book would be very applicable for those who are on this webinar today, and there are real-life case studies, perhaps that you might be able to identify with. No one really reads, in my opinion, a book page to page all the way through the book. You want to find, where am I in the particular book? Where do I fit? What's the line with my needs, my issues, and I want my own solutions? And we hope we've been able to provide that information for you as well. These are the kinds of things that will be addressed in the co-author Rick Darvas part. I wish I were as smart as him, but I'm not. And I'm certainly not a CPA, but you'll see here in our bullet points some of the areas that are addressed: claiming the lifetime learning tax credit, utilizing education assistance programs, etc. And the other thing we wanted to do is to, and you'll find it in the appendix of the book, talk about the family at large, because again, some of you on this webinar today may have a child, again, in high school or grad school. You may have a spouse that's in grad school. We try to address inclusively what a student's needs may be, because just because a student is going on for his or her DNP doesn't mean they have other financial constraints to factor into and to deal with. So we want to remedy that situation and minimize your concerns and hopefully move you forward in a very proactive way. Now, this last slide is just talking about, again, what you see would be covered in the book. Paying your student loans or saving for a future house. It's possible. That's the kind of balance we wanted to strike, which is not what's covered in any book today that I'm aware of. And when we approached Springer with a draft manuscript, they said, we really want to move forward and help graduate nursing students. And again, the book is designed holistically to take advantage of a variety of needs and situations, not just student aid related. My own final thoughts, again, you've heard me say this again in my recurring way: take ownership of the process. And if you can, I would try to get a sense of how much you may have to borrow. Some may not have to borrow much at all, but I suspect some will. It helps to plan or project what your debt burden might be. And again, use that studentaid.gov site to see if they can guide you as well as the counselors in the student aid office. Federal loan forgiveness, I could talk about that for an hour. That is a very ever-changing world, and I think as things move forward over the next 2 to 3 years, there may be a variety of new initiatives focused on federal student loan forgiveness programs. And I would check with your own employer about tuition assistance to assist you with your costs. And as we referenced earlier today, it always helps to compare federal and private student loans. And I want to mention one more time, surprisingly, credit unions can be as competitive or more competitive than a private lender.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. That was some excellent information, some strategies and tips, and perhaps some secrets that were not well known. And as I mentioned at the start of this webinar, we will provide access to a recording to the webinar, in addition to providing a complimentary copy of Carl's book, Compliments of the University of Tampa. So at this point, I'd like to check to see if we have any questions. There is one question that came up, and this is for Dr. Parsons and Mr. Sanguinetti, and it just asks for a little bit more information about what differentiates the DNP project, or perhaps the way that you handle the DNP project?
So our DNP project, we really look at it being translational research. So really taking a real life clinical situation and designing your project to apply it. We really try to start very early on, because that can be a daunting task for somebody going through 6 semesters to envision getting this project done over the course of 4 semesters. So we work with them really early on to identify and frame that capstone project.
That's terrific. And then, Carl, we have just a follow-up question regarding loan forgiveness. And can you reiterate what are some of the best sources regarding federal loan forgiveness? Where do you find that information?
Well, again, what I would do is go to studentaid.gov, as we were mentioning earlier in the presentation, studentaid.gov, to see how the federal government's handling this program. And when I was interviewing a variety of, I would call them national influencers throughout the country, well-known, well-respected colleges from the Northeast and the Midwest, I talked to a professor at a school in the Northeast, and this individual said, Carl, start your book off by saying, in the nursing student world, understanding a lot of it is, it's a mess, quote unquote. And that's how I started off the book. Meaning that it's very difficult for nurses, students of any ilk, if you will, to really understand student loan forgiveness, repayment, income-based repayment. It's all over the map. And it still needs to be better fleshed out by the federal government. But I would go with studentaid.gov. And the other is, there is a 1-800 federal student aid hotline called 1-800-FED-4-FED-AID, 1-800-4-FED-AID. I would also ask them about programs, and if you need information, ask them to send you information.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We are at the end of our time, and I would like to say thank you very much to Carl Buck, the author of Pay for Your Graduate Nursing Education Without Going Broke. Also, thank you so much to the University of Tampa for providing such valuable information regarding their truly innovative DNP program. Special thanks to Dr. Cindy Parsons and Mr. Alec Sanguinetti for your terrific information. And thank you again to the wonderful audience we have. We're all here to help you apply, afford, and achieve success in your graduate nursing education. Stay tuned for future webinars from Springer Publishing and our partners. Once again, thank you very, very much to the University of Tampa. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and goodbye for now.